Hi, you are listening to Baachu Talk, a podcast for government services professionals. My name is Bhaskar, and I will be sitting down with our government services leaders to share their stories, discuss their career, and learn all about their values and collective impact in our society. Today's guest is Cheryl Avery. Cheryl is the Executive Director of Her Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, HMPPS, responsible for prison reform. She joined the MOJ in 2013 with over 30 plus years of business and commercial experience gained from private and public sectors. She has held a series of leadership posts with organizations such as MOJ, Accenture, DXC, Fujitsu, NatWest, and the Met Police Service. She's also the non-exec director for the Government Facilities Services Limited, GFSL. In a current role at HMPPS, she leads on the following portfolios: delivering workforce reform, future development of offender management and rehabilitative culture, medium-term planning program, a review of prisons as a high reliability organization, senior responsible officer for the delivery of two major HMPPS digital and technology programs, Prisons Technology Transformation Program, Prisons Incel Technology Program, managing the supply and demand of PPE to HMPPS in response to COVID-19. From an MOJ perspective, she's also race champion and the chair of Diverse Leadership Task Force. Cheryl has been a non-exec director of GFSL since its setup in February 2018. In addition to working with other non-execs in support of the executive board, Cheryl is also a member of the Audit and Risk Committee and chairs the Remuneration Committee. That's a lot, Cheryl. Welcome, Cheryl, to Baachu Talk. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. It does, when you read it out, it does sound like an awful lot, doesn't it? So, yeah.
I know. I'm just wondering whether you sleep or you just...
I often say to people that I have a low boredom threshold, so I like to keep busy. So there you go.
Perfect, Cheryl. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Let's talk about the very beginning. Where were you born, Cheryl? Let's talk about your high school and education.
Okay, so I was born in Hertfordshire. I still live in Hertfordshire, but I was born in North Hertfordshire in a little town. I'm one of five. My parents arrived there in the early 60s from the Caribbean as part of the Windrush generation. And we grew up in that town because there were lots of people from the same island that my parents came from, which is Grenada in the West Indies. And a lot of people had settled there, so it was a natural place to build a home and have their families. So, grew up there. I went to school at Catholic girls' school, strong Catholic background. My mother in particular was incredibly devout, so there was no choice about going to any other school. My sisters and I went to the girls' school, and my brothers went to the boys' school, not far from where we live. So we spent our formative years there. So great opportunity to meet lots of other people with strong family values, because the religion is based on a lot of that, and engaged with them and worked really hard. Always wanted to be a chef. So I wanted to go to catering college, but my parents said no, and I was a little bit upset. So when it came to to choosing A levels, I did the A levels, but I didn't get the grades I needed to go to university. So which was a real shame. I wanted to go to catering college, and I had all the details gathered together, but mum and dad were quite adamant they wanted me to get a proper job and to go to university, etc. But I self-sabotaged, which is silly with hindsight, because I thought I knew best, as you do at 16, between 16 and 18, you could sort of strong-willed. But on reflection, listening to your parents was the way I should have gone. But I was very fortunate that I ended up working for an organisation who invested in their staff. If you wanted to learn and you wanted to progress, they were prepared to do that for you. So they invested in me to go back to college and to study and end up with all my degree equivalent qualifications, but also to become a member of the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply, which is the professional body for people in the commercial environment and procurement environment. So I was very fortunate to have an organisation that believed in me that much. So yes, great.
Wow, that's very super powerful. You made it sound so simple, and there's straight away you landed some key messages there. That's the dilemma of what do you want to do for your own personal, based on decisions what on 16 versus your parents who had their whole life, whole history behind what they want to do for you. So that's classic. That's classic there. Thank you, Cheryl. So that first job that you had, Cheryl, what was the role?
So, it was numerous roles actually, because I worked for a company which was at the time called ICL, International Computers Limited. They were the only UK-based computer firm building, manufacturing and selling computers in the UK, trying to compete with the Far East. Ultimately, they were taken over by a Japanese company called Fujitsu, which would be a name that people are familiar with now in industry. So these was a large organisation. And I say the investment program that I was involved in, the development program, they gave me the opportunity to work in various roles across the organisation to understand. So it was like a mini graduate scheme, really. I was able to understand how they, the process of building and manufacturing and sourcing the parts to make the computers, and they introduced sort of new models. So got involved with all of that, understanding the business from the ground up. I then moved into the part of the business which sort of showed how we when we manufactured, how we would then ship out and make sure we hit the right markets at the right time and had the right volumes. And then through that connection, I was then able to work alongside the purchasing team, and was given an opportunity by the head of purchasing at the time, a gentleman called Steve Holmes, who invested in me and believed in me and gave me the opportunity to come and learn all about procurement, and I loved it. So that was my first foray into the procurement world, and I stayed in the procurement world, or commercial world as it's now called within civil service, for over nearly 30 years. Over 30 years, it was a really great experience. But I did, as I say, at ICL, I got to learn about the business. I also even had an opportunity to learn about the distribution side of the business. They had built a state-of-the-art distribution centre that was sort of recognised across Europe as one of the leading distribution centres, because it had new technology, so I understood about the logistics, so really got to see how the business worked. So they really, it was a true meritocracy, and they really believed in me. So that gave me a lot of confidence to sort of get into industry and take a path that I hadn't planned, but I really enjoyed. I learned a lot from it.
Totally, Sharon. As a young graduate, trying to find your first career role, 10 years at Fujitsu ISL looks like has built the character, has built the career for you. Is that right?
Absolutely. I learned so much there. And also because the work that they were doing in the procurement space at the time was recognised. Books were written about the way that they procured, the way they managed supplies, or vendor management, as it was called then for people who are in the procurement world. They were introducing leading edge methodologies and practices. So it was a really great grounding in learning how to be an excellent commercial person. There were some fantastic role models there. I had the opportunity to buy lots of different goods and services, and it set me up really well for my next moves into other organisations, which was fantastic. So yeah, I from ICL, I then moved on to NatWest and joined there because I'd worked in that sort of technology environment. I moved into the team that were selling and developing procurement solutions to sell IT into other parts of NatWest and for NatWest themselves. So that was really exciting, operating in an environment where, having been in the sort of component part of building the IT, being in an environment where it was leveraging the IT, it was a natural transition. And I learned an awful lot from that organisation. And I say NatWest was very dynamic, very high profile. I even then got into buying software, which is quite a complex area, but learned a lot from some really great people. And in fact, I was part of the team. I negotiated the software deals for the first online banking product that NatWest launched. So I piloted that. So hopefully, if your online banking works well, I had a hand in that. If it doesn't work well, it's nothing to do with me. So there you go.
1994, 1995 to 1998. What was the IT look like, and what were you procuring? It wasn't during that time we had Windows 95 and other things, Cheryl. So, what was the type of stuff that you were procuring part of IT?
Oh wow, it was a great time to be in IT procurement. It was very dynamic, lots of big deals being done. It was the internet was really strong and dealing with it, internet service providers who were around at the time, some who no longer exist, but trying to build web-based solutions for different environments. Certainly within NatWest with the online banking, that was a key part of it. Finding sort of big software solutions to automate and drive efficiencies through solutions that were being conducted in that environment as well. It was all very, very exciting. So, it was a big part of what NatWest did. A lot of moving from very heavily labour-intensive, manual-based processes into automating those processes. So working with big blue chips like IBM, big computer organisations like Dell, negotiating deals with them, and having a lot of clout and recognising the value of IT. It was quite pivotal to the future of NatWest at the time. So a really exciting time to be there. So it was great. And then I moved on to EDS at the time, which was Electronic Data Systems. It was originally owned by Ross Perot, and it was an organisation that took a completely different perspective on IT. So rather than being the end user, as I had been in the NatWest environment, moving into the EDS environment was really about packaging up IT solutions with other sales solutions, working with the sales teams and the business development teams to sell solutions onto big clients. So sold into the civil service at the time. HMRC was a major customer of EDS at the time. EDS has subsequently been taken over by HP and are now known as DXC, which was the amalgamation of HP, CSC and EDS at the time. So a real amalgamation of big IT outsourcing solutions. So that was a very different perspective. And in that environment, I was looking at strategic sourcing solutions. So strategic sourcing is where you look at various categories of spend and look at where you can drive efficiencies and save money and develop, really strong, sustainable solutions. So that was a completely different perspective. Working for EDS, they were then partially owned by A.T. Kearney, major US consultancy. And A.T. Kearney had their strategic sourcing methodology, and they trained all of us in that environment. I led on the hardware as a solution, hardware maintenance as a solution procurement, and developed a program whereby we took over 200 suppliers and consolidated them down to 5 key suppliers to deliver those services into the organisation and for clients as well, and saved in excess of £70 million. So it was a big piece of work. It was a massive project, and on the back of the success of that, I was then given the opportunity to focus on category management, which is leading on the procurement for specific categories. So I led on hardware and telecoms for UK, but also for Europe, Middle East and Africa, and had teams that supported in developing solutions for the organisation to sell on to our clients. So a really, really exciting dynamic space to be at that time.
God, I'm super jealous of your memory, Cheryl. I mean, you are super fluent in what happened 20, 25 years ago. And I was just wondering while you were talking, can I actually go back 15 years ago when I started my career and think in the same flow as you do? It just clearly tells you how passionate you are and how much you enjoyed your roles, Cheryl. Totally amazing. So from EDS, you switched to Met Police. That was your first entry towards public sector, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So I had a call from a headhunter asking if I would be interested in a move into the civil service. And until that point, I'd only worked in the private sector. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity, actually. It would look great on the CV, but also it'd be an interesting opportunity to go and explore for myself what was happening in that environment. So I joined the Met Police as the Deputy Director for IT telecoms procurement, and was working on some major IT projects for them. I mean, I thought that working for NatWest, there were some big programs, but the size of spend and the enormity and complexity of the programs that I worked on for the Met were just significant. You know, they were making a massive change. The commissioner at the time, Sir Ian Blair, had a real passion for technology and saw the benefit of what it could bring to the police service and wanted to invest in that quite heavily. There was a major program to converge technologies. So rather than having people ringing into a single police station and trying to sort of report crimes or issues, they set up massive call centres across London where they would have CCTV to be able to see what was going on. That was a real start to the real sort of emergence of the CCTV technology across London, together with the call technology, so bringing that into place, and then be able to sort of take the computer systems or the IT systems and dispatch resources into the right place to have a more broader view of what was going on across London and how they could respond to crime and prevent crime in a more effective way by having that consolidation and that convergence, as I say, of all the solutions. So that was a really exciting program to come into. I was also involved in the outsource of the IT infrastructure supplies, so ran a massive procurement. And the biggest challenge for me of coming into the civil service from the private sector is that while strong governance exists in the private sector, because you're spending public purse in the civil service, there has to be extra layers of governance around that. There has to be greater levels of scrutiny, and you have more people that you have to make aware of, what you're spending, how you're spending it, why is it necessary, what are the benefits it's going to bring. And I have to admit, I struggled with that in the first instance. I thought that I could come in, and be able to make decisions really quickly. And I'll be honest, it nearly broke me, actually, because, you can't break the system will absolutely break you, because the governance has been established for a long time for all the right reasons. And it does, it's absolutely necessary to have that structure there. But as a good procurement person, you learn that if you can't go down one path to deliver a solution, you find another way. So I learned how to work within the system to get the outcomes that I was seeking. So I learned about how to engage with stakeholders well in advance, to forewarn them that, I needed them to support me in making decisions, for them to challenge me in making decisions, to make sure that we had the right outcomes and that we were spending the money in the right way. So it was a really great learning experience for me, as well as being in an environment where, we were doing some fabulous things. I mean, the work, the programs that I got to work on were so fascinating. I got a lot of recognition for that. So it was a great time, actually, a great experience for me working for the Met Police.
Totally there, Cheryl. And from Met Police, then you went back to industry for a few more years?
So I went back to Fujitsu, actually. I had a call from a colleague saying, would you be interested in coming back? I mean, this is, many years on from when I was first there. And, I thought this is going to be great. It'd be like going home, be fantastic. So I'd be really excited. And there were a number of people who were still there from when I'd left before. So seeing familiar faces, it just felt great, actually, going back into that environment. But because I'd worked in for the civil service for a number of years at the Met Police, I was brought in as the head of UK public sector sourcing. So there was a programme that was being run through the NHS where they were looking to digitalise a lot of the solutions, and they divided up the country into different regions. And large organisations like Fujitsu and PA Consulting and others bid for these regions to be able to deliver IT solutions and digitalise what was happening in each of those regions. But the programme was fraught with complexity and ultimately started to fail. And regional providers were asked to asked if they could step away. And Fujitsu was one of those. So, I mean, I'd only been there about 18 months before Fujitsu decided that they were going to step away from that contract. And then the whole program was ultimately, as a result, others stepped away. And as a result, the whole program collapsed and they had to revisit and start again because it was just so complex. You know, the NHS, as you know, is a large, complex environment and trying to provide solutions in there that, you know, especially when it's not necessarily well thought through. So it was a bit of a challenge at the time. But so it was an interesting experience. But from there, I decided, you know, where would I go? You know, I had a chance to reflect. And I was very fortunate when I worked for the Met. I was asked to be part of a mentoring program where there'd be a program where private sector and civil service, public sector would come together. So people from the private sector would mentor people in the public sector and vice versa. So this is a program that was set up by Keith Vaz. And so because it was a very senior program, I was asked as a deputy director to be involved, as to sort of be part of the pilot. And it was aimed at people from the Black and minority ethnic community. So I was really lucky that I was then mentored by the then chief exec of what was Alliance and Leicester Building Society, Richard Pym, and Sir Ian Blair mentored somebody from Alliance and Leicester. So we did a swap. And Richard was, and still is, a fantastic mentor. He made a commitment to me then that he would support me, not just for the period of the programme, but as long as I wanted him to be a mentor. And it was great, actually. I learned the real sort of benefit of having a mentor at that time and having somebody who could offer you really good advice objectively, because they weren't part of your organisation. They could sort of just look at the facts and consider the situation and guide you and advise you and help you to sort of think solutions through. And Richard was excellent at that. And he had suggested to me that what I should think about, because of the way that I worked and the way that I engage with people, that I might want to consider consultancy. And I was thinking, well, I don't have a first-class degree, who's going to take me? But out of the blue, again, headhunted, got a call from an agency asking if I'd be interested in joining a new boutique consultancy that was being set up. And it was an American company, and they wanted to establish a foothold in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And they were creating a team of well-established procurement practitioners to run different parts of the organisation. And I was asked to go in, because of my strong background in procurement and in IT and digital, to build out the IT practice for them for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So there were about sort of 25 of us, I think, in a little office opposite House of Fraser on Victoria Street. It was very entrepreneurial, and, you know, having come from environments like the Met Police where there was such strict governance around things, into an environment where it was just everybody, all hands on deck to get the job done. So I built out the IT practice for them. So it involved lots of travel around the world, engaging with some major clients in the IT space. We would go in, having bid for the business to take over their elements of their procurement department. We would go in and become immersed in their environment and operate as if we were part of that organisation. And we would deliver IT and telecom solutions for them. That was just absolutely fantastic. You know, it was hard work and it was long hours, but it was so rewarding doing that, and it was so dynamic. But it burns you out because you can't sustain that year after year after year. I mean, you know, I wasn't spending much time at home with my daughter and my husband, and the work-life balance just didn't exist. So I just felt that, you know, there came a time when I needed to think about what I would do next, but loved every minute of it. And when I decided to leave there, I had letters of thanks from the board directors, who had been so thrilled with my contribution in helping build and establish the organisation in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And in fact, a couple of weeks after I left, the company was sold to Accenture. So it was very, very exciting that we'd established such credibility. If we bid for pieces of business against the likes of Accenture or IBM, we would win in an open competition because we had such a strong team who was so focused and so dedicated. And it was great working in that environment. You know, everybody thrived in that space, but it takes its toll on you after a while.
I think 1983, when you started as a little girl working in a purchasing department for ICL, progressing all the way, taking varied roles, purchasing manager, category manager, deputy director, ICT, head of public sourcing. Then you have the regional lead for EMEA. It's not even region is EMEA, three different geographies there. Looking back, did you ever realize that you would attain this level when you started and when you were very young?
No, not at all. I mean, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. The only thing I really ever had a passion for was cooking. I love to cook. You know, that's something that I do. Times of heightened stress, that's where I go to. Particularly I bake. Baking is the thing I love. And, it's a place that I go to because I enjoy it, and I know that I cook well. People enjoy my food. So I always wanted to cook, but I never thought about a career in industry because there was nothing that I had seen that had really given me, had really sort of sparked my imagination. Also, the challenges, of growing up in an environment where, my parents, as they came from the Caribbean, as I mentioned earlier. My mother was privately educated. She was a scholarship student. I mean, she didn't have a lot of money growing up, but she was very, very bright. And she became a teacher and in the Caribbean. And then when she came to the UK, had assumed that she could just continue her career here, being part of the Commonwealth. But she wasn't given those opportunities, neither was my father. And, Mum ended up working in a factory because every time she would apply for a job, she would be invited in for an interview. And the minute they saw her, they would say, "I'm sorry, the job's gone." And, her story is not dissimilar to many other people who came from the Caribbean at the time. That whole Windrush generation faced a lot of challenge and, and adversity. And they had to rise above it because, they had to provide for their families. So, I didn't have anybody in my family who was a role model from somebody in industry because, that wasn't what we did, So it would have been very easy to just assume that I would follow the same path as my parents. But I always wanted more, and my parents wanted more for me and my siblings. They encouraged us to work really, really hard at school and at work and be the best version of ourselves that we could be. And those values were instilled in us from a very early age. So while I didn't have a very specific idea of what I wanted to do, I knew that whatever I did, I would give my absolute all to it. And so, so I didn't have a grand plan carved out to say, yes, I'm going to do this in X number of years. I just sort of followed my heart, really, and my passions, and just, looked at things that I've enjoyed and tried to find that when I've made a career move, thought about the things that I enjoy and the strengths that I could bring to a particular role, and use that really as my sort of light to guide me more than anything else, rather than specifically deciding that, in 5 years' time I'm going to do X. So, so it's been an interesting journey without a map, really. So, all good.
I think I am sure your parents will be super proud of what you achieved. Did they told you, or I'm sure as a parent they would never tell you by face, but did your mom and dad saw you progressing, bigger and better in your career? Were they happy? Did they share that ever with you?
They did, but sadly, 6 years ago, I lost both my parents. My father, my mother had cancer and was dying, but my father had an accident one day and died the same day. He had a fall. Wow. And then 5 months later, my mother passed away. So they haven't seen me at the sort of pinnacle of my career, but they have seen me grow and develop, and have been super, super proud of everything that me and my siblings have achieved. That they always made a point of telling us how proud they were of us, and they encouraged us and, wanted us to have a better life than they had, but they provided for us and they gave us the foundations to do that. So, so what I do now is largely driven by their legacy of, what they did, the opportunities they've given me and my siblings. We're first generation, and so we're laying the foundations for our children now to be, have a better life than we've had, and not that it was a bad life. It's been, we always knew we were loved. We always knew we were careful. We had very strong value systems, and we didn't have a lot financially, but we always had that really strong value-based system, and that sense of community and family was, absolutely resounding in my life growing up.
A 30-year career, and then you entered MOJ. But before we talk about that, as a procurement purchasing category, you call it commercial, professional, there is always this push about efficiencies and realizing savings. How do you do that? I mean, like 50%, 40%, 25%. If a new procurement professional is listening to this, what advice would you give them how to realize these savings at the same time keeping your supply chain financially resilient?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, because it is so important, particularly in the current challenging economic climate, where a lot of people are going out of business. COVID has sort of wrecked a lot of businesses and just seen some big names go under. But in an environment where you need to drive savings or efficiencies, it's about finding creative ways of doing that. You want to pay a fair price for a good product or service. And it's not about, in the 80s, early 80s, it was very much about, nailing your supplier to the cross and sort of, getting every single penny you could out of them. It's very aggressive, very macho environment. As time has moved on, it's really sort of developed into, finding a solution that's, mutually agreeable, ensuring that the supplier can survive, because the sort of aftermath of the 80s and recognising that you could sort of squeeze every single penny you could out of the supplier is that they would have to cut corners to deliver to your expectations. And ultimately there'd be problems, and then they'd recoup the costs by having to sort of, go through a change control process. So it's recognising that actually, while you want to get the lowest possible price, the overall cost to you as an organisation is greater. So it's looking at, understanding the whole life cost model is really, really fundamental. Knowing that if you sort of squeeze on one point, what's the knock-on effect of that? Having a whole system perspective on the negotiation and planning and preparing, knowing your market, knowing your supplier, understanding, where there is some margins of fat that you could potentially trim some of that off, and know that the supplier is still able to deliver to the quality that you expect, but to make sure that equally at the same time you're not being taken advantage of as a customer. So it's doing your homework really, and making sure that you take the time to invest in that and understand what it is you're negotiating, and knowing what you're prepared to concede on in a negotiation. Have that in your back pocket, because you can give on something to get something much bigger. That's where the sort of real strong negotiating skills come in, where that you can make a sort of magnanimous gesture and concede on a point that it isn't really going to cost you much, but it's a big give for the supplier, which then means that they can give you something back in return that you really want. So it's learning that dynamic and being able to operate well in that environment, but ultimately coming out with a solution where you can work in partnership and you can both survive in the environment.
Wow, well said. That's a 2-minute masterclass there, Cheryl. That's amazing. every word made sense, and I'm sure we could talk about this particular topic for hours. But thank you, Cheryl. Thanks for sharing that. And did you find the procurement practices as you find, like, governance wise, you mentioned on the public sector, especially Met Police, you had a few more layers, whereas in the commercial industry, you had slightly more leeway. When you are procuring services through tenders and stuff, what similarities or what differences did you find on both sides, Cheryl?
There was a lot of structure around procuring in the public sector, or there is a lot of structure because of the procurement regulations. And I'd say those are there for, fairness, for transparency, for, equity, to make sure, that everybody has a good opportunity to bid for pieces of business. So there is a lot of structure that sits around the process that exists across the civil service. And I found that once I worked for the Met Police in the first instance, when I went back into the private sector, I applied a lot of those learnings, because I felt that structure was a really good way of working, because certainly, within the civil service environment, you are audited to ensure that you're complying with the processes. And just to have a really strong audit trail, have a good view of how you've made decisions and why you've made decisions, is really sound practice. So, so applying that in the private sector environment, and also seeing how some business practices have been challenged over the years, and having that sort of rigor around the process has really sort of made a big difference. But, fundamentally negotiating with suppliers, whether in the private sector or the public sector, is very similar. You know what you want to achieve, the outcomes that you want to sort of aim for. But it's just really about making sure, say, that you are prepared. There's not huge differences. Sometimes the volumes that you procure certainly in the areas that I've worked in the civil service, there was a lot of spend in the digital and technology space. So you have a lot more leverage as a client with the suppliers, and it's about negotiating the best possible deal that you can, best possible outcomes, and thinking about where you want to take it. But, it's also about learning how to make the regulations work for you. Whether our frameworks established that help you get to the outcome sooner. It's about making sure that you develop a fit-for-purpose solution and being able to guide the government department that you're working for, the area of civil service that you're working for, guide them through that process as a strong commercial person to sort of help them understand what will deliver the best outcome. So not huge differences, but the structure is probably one of the biggest differences I think you'd find. But fundamentally, buying the product and services is no different, it's the same.
As you rightly said, you were having a high-flying career, EMEA role, and then you decided, okay, it's time for going back to the government, and then you went back to picking up role with MOJ. You were there for a few years as senior commercial specialist, working on some interesting times as well, during Caroline and the other related projects. Do you want to share some of your experiences there, Cheryl?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I left Procurium, which then became Accenture, the consultancy, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I thought I would take some time out, and I would work as a contractor, and I would work in different organisations. I had a wealth of, say over sort of 30 years experience. So it was a good opportunity to sort of then leverage some of that in an environment until I found what it was I wanted to do. So I set up my own limited company, and the first contract that I secured was with the Ministry of Justice. And I stepped through the doors, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the whole ethos of the criminal justice system, what they were trying to do, and the fact that, you walk in as a sort of member of the public thinking, people do bad things and you lock them up. But it's so much more complex than that, so much more interesting. The whole rehabilitation agenda was really, really key. And the fact that how they try to support people in that environment, whether it's in the youth estate, whether it's in the women's estate, or, whether it's just in the sort of adult male estate. There's so much that they want to do, and also in the courts process. And, again, digital and technology formed a huge part of what the MOJ was trying to do. Digital transformation of courts, digital transformation of prisons, taking those manual, cumbersome processes into the 21st century to deliver those solutions. It's really, really exciting. As you said, you mentioned Carillion. I mean, sorry, I'll just take a step back. Going in as a contractor, I just thought, what, I'd quite like to be part of this environment. And I was offered the opportunity. I was asked if I would want to become a permanent civil servant. So I took the opportunity because I thought, I like this, this feels right. For the first time in a long time, I felt that there was a real sense of purpose. It was more than just delivering, savings to impact positively the bottom line of a large corporation. Suddenly it was about supporting people and in their lives, in the way that they run their lives and the services that they had to access through the government. So there was a real sense of purpose, and that was great to be in an environment where I could really, truly give something back and do something constructive. So I was asked to become substantive. Anyway, I said, you mentioned the Carillion situation. As commercial director, responsible for HQ for FM and estates, Carillion were starting to wobble. We were monitoring the situation. We developed a plan as to how we would address that situation, because they were one of the largest providers of facilities management services into the prisons. So we had to make sure that service didn't stop, because it impacts people's lives in a significant way. So we created a plan that we were going to insource and create what we call a GovCo, set up our own company that would exist within the MOJ family. And so when Carillion collapsed, we quickly rallied, and within a month we had this company up and running. We were also able to save over 1,000 former Carillion staff jobs by creating this company. And we just couldn't believe that we were able to rally ourselves so quickly. The team worked relentlessly. I mean, it was just a high octane time, but a very exciting time. And to create something so amazing in such a short space of time that is able to deliver great services to the UK prison service, UK and Wales prison service, sorry, I hate to add, which was fabulous. And being part of that was one of the great achievements of my career, that's for sure.
Totally. I think it always, when there's an impact on the people, it's always amazing. And for you to step in with the wider team to just give the comfort, or at least the assurance, to 1,000+ colleagues in the tested environment was amazing. So MOJ moved on. After MOJ, you still took wider role. You're still part of that GovCo, isn't it?
Yes. So I sit. So we agreed that as part of the sort of transition and the development of the organisation, that it would be useful to have members of the Ministry of Justice sit on the board for Government Facility Services Limited, which is the company we created. So I sit on the board there as non-exec director to guide them through and challenge them through some of the business decisions and help them get started. So I sit on the board. I'm part of the Audit and Risk Committee, and I also chair the Remuneration Committee for them, looking at how they support staff and pay and all of the challenges around that. Because obviously, with an amalgamation of people coming from the private sector back into a public sector body, there's obviously differences and challenges that you have to sort of manage. So the Remuneration Committee looks at that. So very exciting. So I'm still engaged in that as well, and help. I work with the chief exec and the chair of the non-exec board to make sure that they're able to be the best versions of themselves that they can be.
Totally, Cheryl. I mean, like, while you were there in MOJ, we had the European Union exit, and you were also a lead for the directorate there. How was the preparation? On one end, you had Carillion, and on the other end, European Union exit, and then you were also managing the digital transformation of the wider prison service. How was that?
Gosh, yeah. As I said earlier, I do have a low boredom threshold, and I like to keep busy. But also, as part of my career development, I just felt it was a good opportunity. Having been focused so heavily on commercial and IT, I just felt it was important to sort of broaden my perspective. And also, a lot of that coincided with my daughter going to university. I did feel that it was a good time to, have my career again. And that's not in a negative way. It's just an opportunity to explore what I would want to do, for me, because, it was really important for me to sort of make sure that she was safe and well and happy. And now that she was at university, living her life, it was important for my husband and I that we would both sort of, throw ourselves into our careers again, which is great, because she, as an only child, we wanted to be there for her and be parents for her, but then, opportunity to do something different. Really exciting time. So I decided to volunteer for this opportunity initially, and I was also going through a development program called Senior Leaders Scheme, which is a government-wide program, and that gave me insights into lots of other things that were happening across Whitehall. So that gave me a good opportunity to sort of start learning about, thinking about how could I contribute to the EU exit, because when the referendum happened, I thought I want to be part of this. I feel that really passionate about contributing in whatever way that I could. And so by volunteering to lead on this for the commercial team in the MOJ, I learned so much about what was going on in all areas of the organisation, because we had to review every single contract to understand if there were any challenges. And then we had to develop plans to make sure that we had, I'd say, the right level of rigour around the commercial protection of the contract to ensure that we could keep going, because you can't suddenly stop if we leave the EU. We can't suddenly stop providing services into prisons. We can't suddenly stop running courts. We can't sort of stop providing legal aid. There are all sorts of aspects of the business that we needed a really strong business continuity focus, and commercial were absolutely at the heart of that. So we had a really strong team. I was very lucky. Had some great members of the team who worked alongside me, and we were sort of tested out by ministers and the MOJ board as to the sort of robustness and the preparedness of our plans, and we were held in high esteem for being, really well prepared, and the level of confidence in us as a team was incredibly high. So latterly, when the planning for COVID preparedness was happening, I was drawn back in to sort of with the same team actually to work on that, to make sure, because we'd already established a lot of foundations through the getting ready for EU exit. We could repurpose elements of that, but obviously look at the slightly different focus in relation to COVID.
Because you are a genius in taking so many things, you moved on to take Exec Director of HM Prisons and Probation Services. Just after you took, we had COVID. So explain a little bit more about your role of what an Executive Director HMPPS do, and also maybe a few lines of about how we very quickly, supported the organization during the COVID crisis as well, as much as.
No, absolutely. It's probably one of the craziest things that happened, but then COVID has sort of presented some really interesting opportunities for many different people. I mean, I joined in lockdown from commercial because, again, career aspirations to find a stretch opportunity to move into an environment that was away from my comfort zone in the middle of lockdown. If you look at it, from far away, it looks like the maddest thing that anybody could ever do. But I like a challenge, as you can imagine, as you would have heard from all the other things I've said earlier today. And I just felt this would be a great opportunity to really get even closer to the end user in that environment. And I've been given a fabulous opportunity. I work for the Director of General for Prisons for UK and Wales. And, he has had faith in me and asked me to join his team. And he deliberately, he's 30 years, in the prison service. And he asked me to come in because he was aware of the other things that I delivered across the organisation, but wanted to bring somebody in who hadn't had that sort of lived experience of being in the sort of prison service, who could bring some fresh perspectives and some diversity of thought and approach. And that's exactly what I've been able to do. Primarily, I created a virtual team to look at the supply and the continuity supply of PPE for the prison and probation service. And that was a great success. Again, pulled a virtual team together and looked at how we could understand the demand in the environment and the flexing in demand, and how we could then provide the right level of supply. Because at the time, as you know, at the beginning of COVID, the supply of PPE was such a challenge for every organisation. But we worked really hard and were able to get that under control. So we were able to manage that really successfully. So that was an excellent opportunity. And then once things had calmed down there, I started to look at, that was my original remit, to come in and look at reform for the prison. So I'm currently working on that now. and I've set up another. I'm very lucky to have worked with some really great teams, and this team is no exception to that. And looking at all other aspects of next generation prison reform, really, it's about modernising and the prison service and making it more efficient, and ultimately a service of which we can be proud, because that's where we want to be. You know, we recognise that there are things that we can do using digital, using sort of understanding behaviours, culture, and working with staff and third parties to drive this kind of change through the prison service. So that's what I'm focused on now. So, and it's huge and it's diverse, but it is a very, very exciting opportunity, and I'm really honoured to have been given this chance to do that.
Totally. I think it will better because you understand the procurement, you understand the IT, you understand MOJ, you understand, you exit, well placed. I think it's super blessed for you to lead MOJ, HMPPS at this time, Cheryl. So, as you know, we are in this COVID crisis. If you want to shout out any inspirational stories from HMPPS or the wider team that you saw, you can share it.
Yeah, I've seen some fantastic behaviours from people, pulling together that real community spirit and caring for others. The members of the team who have been making face masks to give out to prisoners, but also to people who are more vulnerable. And they've just sort of, bought some reams of material, reams of fabric, and have created that. And that's, just because they felt that it was the right thing to do. I know people who have been cooking when they've cooked their own Sunday roast, they've cooked about 3, 4, 5 additional Sunday roasts and given them to their neighbours. And there are some real inspirational stories around things that people have done. In the midst of all of this, though, we've also had the disproportionate number of deaths of people in the Black and Asian and minority ethnic community. And we have, you mentioned earlier that I'm a race champion and the head of Diverse Leadership Task Force. So we held a number of listening events for staff as well, because we suddenly realised there was a real groundswell following the murder of George Floyd in America. We hadn't realised how much it was going to impact people in the community. And so we started a series of listening events, and there was an outpouring of sort of grief and angst from people around, things needing to change. So that's been a real eye-opener for me as well, about, being able to be there for members of staff with my other race champion colleagues, just listening and giving people the opportunity to talk and, share what they're feeling, what they would like to see. And now developing action plans around, so we've got a race action plan that is going to take us forward and challenge some of the disparity that's existed up until now, and makes it a real difference, using it as an opportunity to sort of drive some really constructive change forward. So we're doing lots of that as well. So I've seen lots of different variations on the theme of how people have seized the opportunity to do something really positive. So it's been really enlightening and heartening to see that, actually. It's been excellent.
So when the COVID thing happened, where were you and how are you adapting in this so-called new normal? It's been 6 months now, Cheryl. How are you doing?
Yeah. So I mean, we sort of knew something was coming, and there was sort of talk about sort of going into some sort of lockdown because other countries had happened. And at the time, actually, interestingly enough, my daughter was on a year abroad in Germany as part of her degree. And so they were having, around Europe, that we were hearing different stories, and suddenly things started to gather momentum. So when the announcement came, I had to sort of get my daughter on a flight and get her back to the UK, because I didn't want her to be landlocked in Germany. So we got her back, and 2 days later, the announcement was made by Boris that we were going to go into national lockdown. And I remember watching the news report, because we knew something was going to happen, but we weren't quite sure what. But when he announced national lockdown and how sort of stark the conditions or the terms of the lockdown were going to be, it was really eerie, because suddenly, it's nice to work from home when you choose to work from home, but when you are suddenly told that that's going to be it, and you don't have the choice, and you're only allowed out for an hour a day, and you will hardly see people, and it just changes the whole dynamic of the way you work. And so people have had to learn, and I've had to learn, how to sort of be on calls with people. Initially a lot of people were on the phone, then it was, using Teams and Zoom and Google Meets and all sorts of different platforms just to engage with people. And it's really changed the way we work. But it's also established some new protocols, because it suddenly made us realise as an organisation, and I know other organisations have found the same, that you can make big decisions. You can continue business. You don't have to be travelling all over the country to, and everybody, have room for all the people in lots of meetings. You can make decisions virtually, and you can keep the business running. You can still do what you need to do, but you don't have to be in that environment. You don't have to be physically present there. It's all very possible. So that dynamic has changed, that people now feel that they can do so much more. I have to say, far more meetings than I've ever had before, longer days. But weekends are precious. I actually sort of pack my laptop away on a Friday night, because I need to feel that it's not my office, it's my home. And,
right.
that sort of drawing that line between when you're working and when you're not working. If the laptop is there, it's really easy to just go and say, I'll look at a few emails. And you have to be disciplined, and that's really important. And also the fact that, holidays were cancelled, so you knew you weren't going to get away. So making the most of time at home, in the summer, sitting in the garden, having time with my husband and my daughter, Zoom quizzes with family and friends, lots of that going on, virtual drinks. So, just had to readapt. And I've been fine. I've enjoyed it. I do miss the sort of the opportunity to just go out to dinner with my husband because we can. I do miss catching up with girlfriends for a drink and a natter, just because you have to sort of think about everything so carefully. And right now we're obviously in the second round of national restrictions, or lockdown 2.0, as my daughter called it the other day.
Yeah.
So again, we have to think about, what's that going to mean for Christmas? I mean, I have one of my sisters has multiple sclerosis, and she has to shield anyway because she's vulnerable. I haven't physically seen her since last December, and that is just the most bizarre experience. I would never have imagined that happening, and not being able to spend any physical time with family and loved ones in that way. It's tough. It's really hard, but you have to learn to adapt, because if you fight against it, you will frustrate yourself, and it will make it a really miserable experience. But you have to learn to find a way to create your new normal, as you say, and just take each day as it comes. Otherwise, you will frustrate yourself, and that then makes it very hard. You don't want to live your life that way.
Totally, Cheryl. I think this is the second masterclass in this podcast. I think you kind of nailed it brilliantly. Like, working from home is a choice, and now when it's mandated, we all are getting through it. At some point, yes, it just feels like, we are just in a prison sitting in our home. And that just reminds me, I think my wedding card, my business card, and when I got married, it was all printed by prisoners in 2008.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. For the first 6 years, I had my career with, I specialized in justice for Serco. So part of that, Kilmarnock, Doncaster, Dowgate, you name it, all the stuff that they did. So we had, so when I told them that I'm getting married, I was made lots of wooden scriptures, designs.
Oh, how lovely.
So yeah, I get really emotional when talk about rehabilitation of prisoners and stuff. They're very talented people, but life kind of put them into different zone there. But it's amazing that you are there making that impact for them. That's beautiful. So we talked more about MOJ, your career and stuff. Now let's talk about you. So tell us three things not many people know about you, Cheryl.
Oh gosh, three things not many people know. Well, I love to cook, and some people do know this, but lots of people don't. So I, in my passion for cooking, when I knew that I couldn't become a chef, there had to be an outlet. So I applied for MasterChef, and I was on MasterChef. I was a quarter finalist actually in 2009.
Wow.
So that was my outlet for my cooking, and to get a ringing endorsement from John and Greg was just fabulous. That's one of the most exciting things I've ever done. So that's one thing. That's a big thing. I'm not sure how many other big things I've got. So I love to sing. I was part of a choir, so I enjoy singing. It just brings joy, and it's just really lovely to sort of, so I cook and I sing at the same time, actually. So I put music on and I cook and I sing, and I'm in my own little world, and that's a great way to sort of, get rid of the stresses of the day and of life generally. So yeah, I love to do that. And growing up, I desperately wanted to be a ballerina, but wasn't able to be. So I live vicariously through my daughter, who is a great ballerina. So it's all very lovely. So yeah,
That's beautiful. And so when you said chef, I was like, wow, that's amazing. But when you said master chef, that's an entirely different league there. Let's bring some random questions here. Cheryl, if you are cooking for a special guest, what would be the cooking that you would do for him or her, and who would you invite?
Oh my goodness me, crikey. Who would I invite? Alive or dead, yeah?
Yeah, anybody.
Yeah. There was a writer called Maya Angelou, very famous black woman, and she was also a professor at university in America. She's got a whole series of books that she wrote about her life growing up, and she was such an inspirational woman. And she wrote a book about her life and talked about different recipes that impacted, that influenced her growing up. And my husband bought it for me, actually, one Christmas. And I loved it. And I would love to cook some of those recipes for her and have her here and just to talk to her and to listen to her. She was a fantastic matriarch. And she didn't judge people, because she had to make some decisions in her life that she wasn't always proud of, but she recognized that when, she one of the things that she says is that you did what you did when you had to, but when you knew better, you did better. And that was such an important thing that, that people sometimes, so this is really key, was, linked to the sort of, the prison service, and the fact that people make decisions for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes good decisions, sometimes not so good decisions, and they can end up in an environment where they're sort of paying for the price for the decision that they've made. But, the whole rehabilitation piece around, knowing better and doing better, that really sort of lends itself to that space and that thought process. So she would be fabulous. I'd love to sort of cook for her. And I love to bake, so there's always something chocolatey in my house. And I love cooking chocolate. I've also learned a few years ago how to make chocolates. So I make for Christmas. I make little hampers for friends, and I give them that to them with homemade chocolates and goodies. So I would, in dinner parties, I'll have little plates of chocolates that I've made as an after dinner treat. So I make sure she had chocolate as well, because I love chocolate. So we've got to share that, haven't you?
Got you. That's amazing. So, what do you cook better than anyone? What's your favorite dish to cook?
Oh, well, gosh. I make a triple layered carrot cake that everybody who has it absolutely loves it. It's got the icing is cream cheese and clementine, and it just brings out the orange flavour from the clementine, brings out the flavour of the carrot, and it's very moist and it's very unctuous is the word that's used on MasterChef a lot, but it never ever fails to please family and friends and anybody who has a slice of this cake. It's just, I made it. I baked for my teams actually at work. In the days when we used to be able to go in, I would always, that's how I motivate them. I bring lots of baked goods in for them. And the first time I brought this carrot cake in, I would send an email around saying, "There's cakes, please help yourself." And it was literally gone within 20 minutes. It was a really huge 9-inch, 3-tiered carrot cake, and it was gone in 20 minutes. And people were just raving about it. So, that's my signature bake.
Totally. And while you were talking that, I was checking the next train to Hertfordshire. I'm coming there. Three-tiered cake. All I was thinking was the three-tiered carrot cake. Next time any leftover, don't throw that. That is a homeless guy here. That's beautiful. So you mentioned that you like singing. Do you have a favorite pop band or anything that you listen to frequently?
Oh gosh, I have a very eclectic taste in music. Having a daughter who's in her early 20s, I listen to a lot of contemporary music. I listen to I like R&B and soul. I like songs that I can really sing to. So like Whitney, Mariah, stuff like that. But I also like lots of rap. But I love Stevie Wonder. He's a fantastic songwriter and a musician and really, really talented. And I love his music, and there's a lot of meaning in the songs that he writes, and he writes about his life and things that are around him. So, yeah, I really enjoy that. But I said I'm not averse to some Beyonce or some Stormzy at the same time.
Perfect. Is there any food that you tried but you will never try again? Anything that?
Oh my goodness. Any food that I've tried that I wouldn't try again? Gosh, I mean, I've eaten lots of different things in different places we've been to around the world. I do try everything once, and I may not try it again. I'm just trying to think of things that I've had that just take it a step too far. I know we went on holiday to Morocco one year, and there were lots of things. We went to a restaurant that was like a massive meze, which is like a whole selection of things. And you take lots of things and you sort of try it and you think, oh, I'm not sure what that is. So I say I will try everything, but if I try it and I don't like it, then I will probably just leave it on the side of the plate. But I am open to trying lots of different things. So, yeah.
Who haven't you already mentioned that you haven't seen your sister? Who haven't you met in a long time, and you are thinking that they'll be doing okay? Is there anybody?
Gosh, who haven't I met in a long time? A few friends who sort of who live in other parts of the country. My best friend at school, she got married a few years ago, and I had the privilege or the honour of making her wedding cake because she knows that I've got this passion, so she asked if I would make her wedding cake. And I haven't seen her in a long time, and it's been challenging because her husband was diagnosed with prostate cancer, so they've been going through some challenging times, and I do miss her because we sort of shared so much growing up, and she liked to sing as well. Actually, we would sing a lot at school and sort of dance a lot. We would always go out to sort of parties and discos and things, and so I miss that contact with her because she was such a big part of my life growing up, because our families became great friends, and I do miss seeing her.
Got to share it. Because you mentioned singing a few times, do you want to sing a little bit?
Oh my goodness, no, I've got a sore throat, so I'm afraid you probably hear I'm a bit croaky, so I do apologise, I'm a bit croaky. I'm definitely not warmed up, so thank you for the offer, but I will decline, I'm afraid.
Okay. So you mentioned that you have traveled to a few places. Do you have a favorite place that you travel to frequently, or is there any place that you would like to travel?
Yes, as a family, we absolutely adore Italy. The food and the scenery and the culture and the environment, they have a real passion for life. It really reminds me a lot, actually, of the Caribbean, where my parents are from, which I absolutely adore, without exception. But Italy just has a real draw for us. We love it. We've been to lots of different parts. So my husband loves to ski, so we've been, he's skied in the Italian Dolomites, and that's beautiful to go there in January when the air is so crisp and cold and fresh, and take that in. But equally to go to Rome or to Florence or Siena or down to the south, and sort of try, each region has its own dish, that you can try, and everything is fresh because they produce so much locally. You're not having to import lots of goods, and it's just a great experience being there. And it's sunny most of the time, so you get really great weather. And there's, the Italians are so incredibly stylish. So shopping, that's my other passion, actually. I love to shop. I love handbags and shoes. And Italy is the best place for handbags and shoes, without exception.
God, dear. So how many bags and shoes do you have, Cheryl, then?
I don't fit this way, but my family call me Imelda Marcos, so that's probably a hint.
Oh, that's great. So if I ask your daughter a reference about Mavi, what do you think she will say about you?
Gosh, she will say that she gives good advice, and that she is a strong role model, and that she's very nurturing and caring, and makes a lot of time for her.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So what's one trait you like the most about yourself?
What's one trait? But I make a lot of time for people. I try to be accessible, and because that's something that I learned from particularly my mother. My mother was really, really good at that. She, when she at her funeral actually, so many people came up and told us stories about things that Mum had done for them, and she had never made a big fuss about it. She just did it, and that's something that I learned, that it's really important to give something back and to make time. We go through life and you want to feel that you've made a difference, and so making time for people who need help and support is really important. So I do make a point of doing that.
Totally. So if we are writing a book about your story so far, an autobiography, what title do you think we should give to your book?
Oh, I don't know. Passion for pastry? I don't know.
That's so cool.
Well, yeah, because that's still, no matter what I do, I still go back to the cooking. That's the thing that sort of grounds me, that centers me. In spite of all the other stuff that's going on, the cooking's always there. Trying. I love reading about it and researching about it and trying different things. And challenging myself, I don't want to just turn out the same old stuff. So so that's always going to be there. And that's always at the heart of everything I do. And the fact that having sharing it with others is a big part of who I am and what sort of drives me. So yeah.
Do you have a memorable kitchen fail?
Oh my goodness me, yes. I every year I make my daughter's birthday cake ever since she was a baby. So without fail, I've always made her birthday cake, and invariably, because she has different groups of friends from school and from uni and what have you, we end up having more than one party, which also means more than one birthday cake. And one year I was sort of strapped for time, and I tried to make this cake, but I didn't leave myself enough time, and it was quite a complex construct. It's called a piñata cake. So you scoop out the set. Once you bake the cake, you have two sort of dome cakes. You scoop out the centre, and you once it's cooked, and you fill it with sweets and chocolates, and then you put it together. Because you really should make it 24 hours in advance to allow the cake to stabilise. But I only had time to make it that morning, and as I put the cake together, I was starting to ice it, and the whole thing just collapsed in a heap. And I had lots of crumbs and chocolate and icing everywhere. So it was absolute disaster. So I had to quickly make another cake that wasn't going to be as complex in structure, so that she would have a cake for that particular party. So, yeah.
God, dear. That's amazing. So I was about to ask you, what's the most adventurous thing that you've ever done other than baking this cake, Cheryl?
The most adventurous? Oh gosh, I swam with dolphins in Florida.
Oh, wow.
In Orlando. Yeah, I'm not a great fan of water, but we were going, and I was really deliberating, and friends said, I said, but I'm not a strong swimmer, and they said, look, you get a life jacket so you'll be fine, but it is a once in a lifetime thing, and I did it, and I'm so proud of myself because it was such an exhilarating experience. So yeah.
Totally. What's on your bucket list?
On my bucket list, crikey, still so many things to do. Crikey. I would love to go to see the Northern Lights. I haven't seen that. But my husband and my daughter love me because I like my home comfort. And I would also like to spend a night in a nice hotel because I watched a program recently where Giles Coren and Monica Galetti spent a night in this ice hotel, and it's freezing, and I don't like being cold. They find it hilarious that I would even possibly contemplate this, but I would just love to do it, to say that I've done it and have the experience. So who knows? We shall see whether it happens.
So who are the people who have been the most influential in your life and career?
My mum and my husband. My mum was such a fantastic matriarch, such a great role model. She triumphed in the face of adversity, and never for 1 minute did we ever doubt, as children growing up, that we were loved and cared for. And she made time for us, and I think, crikey, I'm busy enough with one child. I don't know how she coped with 5 children, and she was a real stalwart of our community. Growing up locally, people would come to her for advice and for guidance, and see her as somebody who they trusted and valued and loved. And so, so I tried to emulate a lot of those sort of behaviours that my mum sort of displayed with us growing up. And then my husband, because he challenges me in a really healthy way and encourages me to be the best version of myself. And of all the people that I've sort of met in my life, he's been really good at doing that, and champions me and believes in me more than anybody else I know. So yeah, fantastic.
Totally super blessed to have such strong supporters in your family there. So what advice would you give a babe aspirant wanting to pursue a career similar to yours?
You need to know who you are and what you want to do. Excuse me, sorry. And by that I mean, so in order to help you to get to that stage, because sometimes people don't know the answers to those questions. So, finding a good mentor, somebody who can talk to you and offer you advice and give you the benefit of their experience to help you shape that thinking. Forming a network of like-minded people who share the desire and have the aspiration to develop their career further. That's really important as well, and leveraging that network and maintaining it. When you go into a mentoring and a networking relationship, it's not about being mercenary. It's about putting in as much as you take out. So recognizing that you have to give something as well as being able to take things away from it. And, if you get the opportunity to get some coaching is invaluable. I work with the most fabulous executive coach. I've worked with her for about 4 years now, and she has really helped me shape my thinking, become the best version of me that I can be, and just to consider things in a really positive and constructive way. And it's like having a second mum, actually. It's quite interesting. She celebrates the successes with me. She sort of, cries with me when there are lows, and she gives me really great advice, but helps me to bring out the best of me so that I'm a really strong leader and a good person. So if you get the opportunity to have a coaching relationship, that's really excellent. And, find people who are really supportive of you, who can help your career as well. That's really important.
Totally, Cheryl, totally. So looking back when you were young, 1983, starting your purchasing career, what's one thing you wish you had known when you began your career?
One thing I wish I'd known, crikey. But you know what? You need to just be tenacious, stick with it, because, things will work out. What seems quite bleak and hopeless one day will turn around. It's never always the same 2 days in a row. And if you sort of engage and you work really hard and you put the best of you into things, then ultimately it comes good.
Totally. So what's the best piece of advice you have received, and from whom?
Wow. Actually, when I worked for the Met Police, I used to work with the head of diversity there, and we were trying to push through some different policy pieces of work. And there were decisions that needed to be made, and everybody was putting a lot of pressure on because they wanted to see the programme succeed. And, she said, we need to sort of take our time and think about the decisions that we want to make. And one of the things that she said to me was that, doing nothing is always an option. And I thought, what do you mean doing nothing? And it's just like, it wasn't that we do nothing at all. It was just taking the time to consider. So you didn't have to make a decision right away, taking time to reflect and consider a situation in the round, because as I mentioned earlier, things change within 24 hours, don't they? And sometimes letting things play out and let the answer come to you is what's needed. Don't feel the need to absolutely make a decision unless it's absolutely critical and you need to do it. Yeah, that's fine. But generally, when you are making decisions, sometimes doing nothing and letting a situation play out is really key. And that was a really great piece of advice that, I would learn to sort of, feeling the need to sort of just make a decision, move on. No, sometimes just letting yourself have that space to think about, because you can change your mind around the direction you want to take something or the advice that you want to give somebody. So just giving myself that space to do that is really important.
Totally. Wow, that's very, very powerful there, Cheryl. Cheryl's successful career, beautiful family, amazing master chef. You have a beautiful smile, Cheryl, and an amazing laugh. So what next for you? What are you looking forward in the future?
I still want to, I think I've got another big job in me if the opportunity presents itself. I feel that, I'm enjoying what I'm doing so much working for the civil service. I would like to continue to progress and develop, because it's really important to be a positive role model. I am the most senior black woman at the MOJ at the moment. And a lot of, while that's a great opportunity, it's quite a heavy burden to carry around as well. So I want to see others progress. So I want the opportunity to show people that it is possible, they can do it, and to challenge the sort of the disparity in numbers of senior black and minority ethnic representatives across the civil servant, and just be really strong positive role models, and to achieve the dreams and aspirations that our parents had for us, and to say, look, done it. I mean, what a great endorsement that is at the end of the day.
100%, Cheryl. This has been a super inspirational episode. Cheryl, before we close, last minute or two, is there anything else that you would like to share to the listeners, or is there any part of your life or career that we have missed that maybe we could revisit in this last 1 minute?
I think we covered an awful lot, actually. So it's just know yourself and your brand. Be confident in that. Know who you want to be, and pursue that. Don't feel you have to compromise who you are to fit in or to be accepted, because you have to have your integrity intact at the end of the day. And if you're trying too hard to be something that you're not, it's not sustainable, and something will give. So be yourself and know your brand.
Wow, that's a beautiful end and a very powerful end to this episode, Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today at Baachu Talk.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today as well.
Thank you. Wish you, your HMPPS colleagues, your family, your loved ones, friends, everybody who touch, who eats in your food, all the good and happiness. Please continue to inspire everyone around you. Stay safe, stay sane, and stay healthy. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Speak to you soon.
And you too. Thank you so much.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Please do visit baachu.com/Baachu Talk podcast to this specific episode link to everything that was mentioned in this episode. Don't forget to subscribe, review, and share Baachu Talk podcast with your loved ones. We will see you at the next episode with another special guest. Until then, it's Bhaskar Sundram from Baachu signing off.